The crystal throne room stretched as wide as 3 football fields. Purple light pulsed from the walls, casting shadows that moved like living things. Emperor Vextar sat on his throne, made from a single piece of black star glass. His 6 arms gripped the armrests so tight that cracks appeared in the ancient stone. Around him, his war council lay in ruins. General Mordok, who had conquered 12 worlds, was dead. Admiral Zexara, master of space battles, had fallen 3 days ago. One by one, his greatest warriors had faced the enemy and lost. The enemy had no name in any language. They called it the Void Swarm. It came from the dark spaces between stars, eating everything in its path. Planets, suns, entire solar systems, all gone. The swarm left nothing behind but empty space. "My lord," said Commander Felix, the last of his generals. Half of the alien's face was covered in fresh scars. "The swarm has taken the Nexus system. Our defenses lasted 6 hours. Vextar closed his 4 eyes. The Nexus system had been their strongest fortress. It should have held for months. "How many ships do we have left?" the Emperor asked. 3,000, my lord. But most are damaged. 3,000 ships. Once, the Zephyrian Empire had commanded 50,000 vessels. They had ruled 3 galaxies with an iron fist. Now they were hiding in their home system, waiting to die. Vextar stood up from his throne. His purple skin glowed with anger. "Bring me the Vault Keeper." The Vault Keeper was older than anyone could remember. He looked like a walking skeleton covered in gray cloth. He carried an ancient book that nobody else could read. "You called for me, my lord?" the Vault Keeper said. His voice sounded like wind through dead leaves. "Tell me about the champion's call," Vextar said. The Vault Keeper's eyes widened. "My lord, that device has not been used for 1,000 years. It is dangerous, unpredictable." "Everything is dangerous now," Vextar replied. "Tell me how it works." The old creature opened his book. The pages glowed with soft light. "The champion's call reaches across space and time. It finds the strongest warrior on any world. But my lord, we do not know what it might bring us." Vextar laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Keeper, I have lost my best generals. My fleets are broken. My empire is dying. What could be worse than what we face now?" The Vault Keeper bowed his head. "As you wish, my lord. But remember, the device chooses based on strength, not appearance. The strongest warrior might not look like what we expect." 2 hours later, they stood in the ancient summoning chamber. The room was deep underground, carved from solid rock. Strange symbols covered every surface. In the center sat a ring of metal and crystal, older than the Empire itself. The Vault Keeper placed his hands on the controls. "The device will scan the galaxy for the strongest warrior. Once it finds them, we cannot send them back." "Do it," Vextar commanded. The machine came alive with a sound like thunder. Light shot up from the ring, reaching toward the ceiling. The air itself seemed to tear apart. Energy crackled and sparked around the chamber. "It has found something," the Vault Keeper shouted over the noise. "A small world in the outer rim. The locals call it Earth." "Earth?" Commander Felix spat. "That primitive mudball? We cataloged it centuries ago. They barely have space travel." The light grew brighter. The machine screamed like a living thing in pain. Then, with a flash that blinded everyone in the room, everything went quiet. When their vision cleared, they saw him. A human male stood in the center of the ring. He was not tall, maybe 6 feet. His brown hair was messy and had pieces of grass in it. His clothes were dirty and torn. Mud covered his boots. In his right hand, he held what looked like a large knife, but the metal was red with rust. The man looked around the room with wide blue eyes. His face was pale with shock and fear. "What the hell?" he said in his primitive language. Commander Felix burst into laughter. This is our champion? Look at him. He is covered in dirt like a farmer. His weapon is falling apart. This is what the great device chose?" Vextar stared at the human. The man was clearly terrified, but he had not dropped his weapon. He held it ready even though he was shaking. "Vault Keeper," the Emperor said slowly. "Are you certain the device worked correctly?" "My lord, the champion's call has never failed. If it chose this being, then he is truly the strongest warrior on his world." The human, Jake Miller, though they did not know his name yet, took a step backward. He raised his rusty machete with both hands. "I don't know where I am," Jake said, "but I got work to finish back home. So whoever you are, just point me to the door." More laughter echoed through the chamber. Even the guards were smiling now, but Emperor Vextar did not laugh. Something in the human's eyes made him pause. Fear, yes. Confusion, certainly. But underneath it all was something else, something that reminded the Emperor of himself when he was young and fighting for his throne. Determination. Guards, Vextar said quietly, take our guest to the holding cells. Give him food and water. Tomorrow we will test him properly. As the guards led Jake away, the Emperor heard the human mutter under his breath, Linda is going to kill me if I miss dinner. Vextar watched until the strange warrior disappeared through the doorway. Then he turned to his advisors. Prepare the arena, he commanded. If this human truly is Earth's strongest, then he will prove it. And if he is not? The Emperor's voice trailed off. If he is not, my lord? Commander Felix asked. Then we are all dead anyway. Jake sat in his cell, cleaning his machete with a piece of torn cloth. The blade was still rusty, but at least the black blood was gone. His hands shook a little as he worked. Killing those creatures in the arena had been the worst thing he had ever done, but it was them or him. The door opened and a guard brought in another tray of gray soup. This time, though, someone else followed the guard into the room. She looked almost human, except her skin was pale blue, and her hair was silver like moonlight. She wore simple clothes, not the fancy armor of the other aliens. Her eyes were green and reminded Jake of his late wife, Linda. Hello, Jake Miller, she said in perfect English. Jake nearly dropped his machete. You know my name? And you speak English? I know many things about your world, she said, sitting down on the floor across from him. My name is Amy Parker. I was born on Earth just like you. Jake stared at her. But you look like them, Amy smiled sadly. I was taken from Earth when I was 7 years old. The Zephyrians found our world by accident 50 years ago. They took me to study, to learn about humans. Over time, their medical treatments changed how I look, but inside I'm still human. 50 years? Jake said. But you do not look that old. Alien medicine can do amazing things, Amy replied. I have been studying our people ever since they took me. I know more about humans than any other being in the galaxy. Jake set down his machete. So you know I'm not really a champion, right? That machine of theirs made a mistake. Amy shook her head. No mistake, Jake. You are exactly what the Champions Call was looking for, but not for the reasons they think. She stood up and began pacing around the small room. Tell me, what did you see when you fought those creatures? Jake thought about it. They were scary as hell, but they were just animals. Dangerous animals, but still just animals. They had patterns, habits. Once I figured those out, the rest was just farm work. Exactly, Amy said, her eyes lighting up. That is what makes humans different. Every other species in the galaxy sees those creatures as monsters, as forces of nature that cannot be understood. But you saw them as problems to be solved. She sat back down and leaned forward. Jake, do you know what Earth is like compared to other worlds? It is home, Jake said simply. It is a death world, Amy replied. Most planets that support life are peaceful places. Gentle weather, few predators, plenty of food. Earth is not like that. Earth tried to kill everything that lived on it for millions of years. Jake laughed. Tell me something I do not know. Last year I lost half my crop to floods, then the other half to drought. The year before that it was locusts. That is my point, Amy said.
Humans evolved on a world that was constantly trying to kill them.
You learn to survive by being stubborn, clever, and adaptable. You learn to turn problems into solutions. She stood up again and touched the wall. It became transparent, showing the view outside. Jake could see the alien city spreading out below them, all crystal towers and floating vehicles. Look at this empire, Amy said. They conquered 3 galaxies by being stronger and smarter than everyone else. Their technology is amazing. Their armies are huge. But when they face a problem they cannot solve with force or intelligence, they panic. And the Void Swarm is one of those problems? Jake asked. The biggest one they have ever faced, Amy confirmed. The swarm has destroyed entire civilizations. It has been growing stronger for thousands of years. The Zephyrians have thrown everything they have at it and nothing works. Jake walked over to the window and looked out at the alien city. What exactly is this swarm? Where does it come from? Amy's face grew dark. Nobody knows for sure. They appeared in this galaxy about 500 years ago. They eat everything. Planets, stars, even space itself. They leave nothing behind but emptiness. But they are alive, right? Living things have needs. They have weaknesses. That is what I have been trying to tell the Emperor for decades, Amy said. But his generals only think about fighting. They want to meet the swarm in battle and destroy it with superior firepower. Jake nodded. Like trying to stop a flood by shooting at it. What do these creatures eat? How do they reproduce? Where do they sleep? Amy stared at him. Those are the exact questions I have been asking. The ones nobody else seems interested in. Because you are thinking like a human, Jake said. And I am guessing the answers are not what they expect. Before Amy could reply, the door burst open. Commander Felix stormed in with a squad of guards. Step away from the prisoner, he ordered Amy. You were not given permission to be here. The Emperor gave me permission to study the human, Amy replied calmly. The Emperor is making a mistake, Felix snarled. This primitive got lucky in the arena. That is all. He is not our salvation. Jake stood up and faced the commander. You are right about one thing. I'm not your salvation, but I might be able to help with your bug problem. Felix laughed. Bug problem? The Void Swarm has destroyed 40 star systems. They are not bugs. Everything is bugs if you look at them right, Jake said. I have been dealing with pests my whole life. Locusts, army worms, corn borers. The trick is not to fight them where they are strong. What are you suggesting? Amy asked, though her eyes showed she already knew. I am suggesting we stop thinking about this as a war, Jake said. Wars are about destroying the enemy. Pest control is about understanding the enemy. You do not beat locusts by building bigger bug zappers. You beat them by figuring out what they need and making sure they cannot get it. Commander Felix's face twisted with anger. You dare compare the greatest threat in galactic history to insects on your pathetic little farm? Jake picked up his machete and tested the edge with his thumb. Commander, I killed 5 of your unstoppable monsters with a rusty blade and some common sense. Maybe it is time you started listening to the pathetic little farmer. Amy stepped between them before Felix could respond. The Emperor wants to see both of you, she said. Now. As they walked through the halls toward the throne room, Amy whispered to Jake. What you said about pest control. Do you really think it could work? Jake thought about the locust swarms that had plagued his region for the past few years. The government had tried everything. Pesticides, pheromone traps, even bringing in birds to eat them. Nothing worked until old Carl Peterson figured out that the locusts were following water sources during a drought year. Amy, Jake said quietly, I think your void swarm is not trying to destroy the galaxy. I think it is trying to survive. And if that is true, then maybe we can give it what it needs without letting it eat everything. Amy's eyes went wide. You think they are refugees, not conquerors. I think they are hungry, Jake corrected. And hungry things do desperate things. But if you can figure out what they really need to eat. He did not finish the sentence, but Amy understood. For the first time in 50 years, she felt something she had almost forgotten. Hope. The throne room doors loomed ahead of them. Beyond those doors, Emperor Vextar waited with the future of 3 galaxies hanging in the balance. Jake gripped his machete and thought about home. About Linda, who had died 3 years ago. About his farm, which was probably being eaten by deer while he was gone. About all the simple, ordinary problems that seemed so much easier than saving entire civilizations. But problems were problems, whether they were in Nebraska or 3 galaxies away. And Jake Miller had been solving problems his whole life. The void swarm filled the sky like a storm cloud made of living darkness. From the palace windows, Jake could see the creatures moving through space, their bodies blocking out the stars. The Emperor's fleet waited in defensive positions, ready for a battle that Jake hoped would never come. 5 minutes until they enter our atmosphere, Commander Felix announced. His voice was steady, but Jake could see the fear in his 4 eyes. Jake stood in the command center, surrounded by the humans who had answered the call. Ben Watson was under a control panel, his tools scattered around him as he made last-minute adjustments to the alien equipment. Lisa Chen sat with a group of young alien technicians, teaching them breathing exercises to stay calm. Dan Roberts was checking the emergency systems with the same careful attention he gave to fire safety back home. Are you sure about this? Emperor Vextar asked Jake for the 10th time. No, Jake admitted, but I am sure that fighting them will not work. We tried that for 500 years, remember? Amy walked over to them carrying a tablet full of data. The modified transmitters are ready. If your theory is correct, this should work. Jake nodded and picked up the communicator. His voice would be broadcast not just to the approaching swarm, but to every screen in the Empire. Billions of aliens would hear what he had to say. My name is Jake Miller, he began. I am a farmer from a small world called Earth. I grow corn and fix broken things. I am not a warrior or a diplomat or a scientist. But I think I understand what you need. The swarm slowed its approach. Some of the creatures at the front turned toward the palace as if they were listening. You are hungry, Jake continued. You have been hungry for a long time. You came to this galaxy because your own home was dying and you need energy to survive. You need to feed your young. On the screens around the command center, Jake could see the swarm creatures moving restlessly. They were definitely listening. The people of this empire think you are monsters, Jake said. But I do not think you are monsters. I think you are parents trying to keep your children alive. I think you are refugees looking for a new home. Commander Felix stepped forward. Human, what are you doing? You cannot negotiate with these creatures. Jake held up his hand for silence. You attacked their worlds because those worlds had the energy you needed. But there is another way. Ben, are you ready? Ben Watson crawled out from under the control panel, wiping grease from his hands. Ready as I will ever be. But Jake, if this does not work, it will work, Jake said with more confidence than he felt. He turned back to the communicator. We know what you need, he told the swarm. You need the energy from dying stars. You need the radiation that comes from black holes. Your species evolved near the galactic core, where that energy was plentiful. But this galaxy's core is mostly dead space now. The swarm had stopped moving entirely. Even the Emperor's military advisors were staring at Jake in amazement. So we are going to give you what you need, Jake announced. Ben Watson here is a mechanic from Detroit. He has spent the last 4 hours modifying your Emperor's energy collectors. Instead of taking power from living worlds, they can now harvest energy directly from space itself. Ben stepped up to the communicator. We are going to create artificial feeding zones, he explained. Safe places where you can get the energy you need without destroying inhabited planets. Lisa Chen joined them at the microphone. And in return, we want you to help us understand each other. I am a teacher. I can help your young learn about this galaxy, and help our people learn about yours. The largest creature in the swarm, something the size of a small moon, moved closer to the planet. When it spoke, its voice came through the ship's communication system like the sound of wind through empty space. You understand. Hunger? Jake smiled. Friend, I have been hungry before. We all have. Hunger makes you do things you would not normally do. But there are better ways to fill an empty belly than taking food from others. We do not wish to destroy. We only wish to live. Then let us help you live, Jake replied. But you have to stop eating planets. There are people on those worlds just trying to take care of their families, just like you. For a long moment, space was silent. Then the great creature spoke again. Show us these feeding zones. What happened next was not a battle. It was the strangest construction project in galactic history. Human engineers worked alongside void swarm creatures to build energy collection stations in empty space. Carol Murphy, the diner owner from Ohio, found herself teaching alien children how to cook with ingredients that did not come from destroyed worlds. Dan Roberts organized rescue teams that went to planets the swarm had already damaged, saving survivors and helping with rebuilding. The work took 3 weeks. By the end of it, the swarm had 12 artificial feeding stations scattered throughout the outer system. The creatures no longer needed to attack inhabited worlds. They could get all the energy they needed from cosmic radiation and solar wind. More importantly, they were no longer alone. The Empire's scientists worked with swarm researchers to understand how both species could share the galaxy safely. Children from dozens of worlds played with young swarm creatures in specially designed parks. Former enemies became neighbors. Jake stood on the palace balcony watching ships from both species working together to build another feeding station. His rusty machete hung at his side, but he had not needed to use it since that day in the arena. It is time, Amy said, walking up beside him. Jake nodded. He had known this moment would come. The crisis was over. The galaxy was safe. It was time to go home. Emperor Vextar appeared in the doorway behind them. Human Jake Miller, you have saved my empire and countless worlds. Name your reward and it shall be yours. Jake thought about all the things he could ask for. Wealth beyond imagination, a palace of his own, immortality, technology that would make him the most powerful human who ever lived. Instead, he said, I want safe passage home for all the humans who came to help. And I want your promise that Earth will be left alone. No more taking people without permission. The Emperor bowed his head. It shall be as you say. But are you certain there is nothing else you desire? Jake smiled and touched his machete. Your Majesty, I got corn to plant and a tractor that needs fixing. That is all the reward I need. An hour later, Jake stood in the same summoning chamber where this whole adventure had started. The other humans had already been sent home, back to their ordinary lives and extraordinary problems. Now it was his turn. "Will you come back?" Amy asked. She had decided to stay and help with the ongoing cooperation between the species. "If you need me," Jake replied, "but I suspect you folks will do just fine without an old farmer getting in the way." The summoning device activated with its familiar sound of thunder. Light surrounded Jake, and for a moment he felt like he was flying through space itself. Then he was standing in his backyard again, behind his barn with the brush he had been cutting still lying where he had left it. The sun was setting over his cornfield, and somewhere in the distance he could hear his neighbor's dog barking at something. Jake looked down at his rusty machete, then at the corn that needed harvesting. Tomorrow he would have to fix the fence in the north pasture. The tractor needed new spark plugs. There were a dozen ordinary problems waiting for his attention. He smiled and got back to work. After all, problems were problems, whether they were in Nebraska or 3 galaxies away. And Jake Miller had always been good at solving problems. That night, as he sat on his porch drinking coffee and watching the stars, Jake wondered if anyone would believe him if he told them where he had been. Probably not. It was too strange, too impossible. But sometimes when the wind was just right, he thought he could hear something like the voices of his new friends, carried on the breeze from somewhere far beyond the sky, and that was enough. Up among those stars, a galaxy lived in peace because a farmer had refused to believe that hunger could only be satisfied by taking from others, because sometimes the strongest warriors are those who choose not to fight at all. Jake finished his coffee and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new problems, and he would solve them one at a time, just like always. After all, that was what farmers did. Emperor Vextar sat on his crystal throne, studying Jake Miller like he was trying to solve a puzzle. The human stood in the center of the vast room, still dirty, still holding his rusty machete. Around them, the Emperor's advisors whispered among themselves in worried voices. "You claim the Void Swarm can be defeated without battle," the Emperor said finally. "Explain." Jake looked around the room at all the aliens staring at him. Their faces showed everything from hope to anger to outright disbelief. He took a deep breath and tried to put his thoughts into words. "Your Majesty, you have been fighting this swarm for how long?" 500 years, Commander Felix answered. "And in that time they have only grown stronger." "Right," Jake said. "So fighting them is not working. But has anyone ever tried to understand them?" The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Jake stepped forward. "I mean, where do they come from? What do they eat besides planets? How do they make more of themselves? Do they sleep? Do they get sick? Do they have families?" "They are monsters," Felix spat. "They do not have families." "Everything has families," Jake replied. "Even locusts have families. The question is, what are they trying to protect?" Amy stepped forward from where she had been standing quietly. "My lord, if you would allow Jake to study our records of swarm attacks, he might see patterns that we have missed." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. Give the human access to our military database. But I want guards with him at all times." 3 hours later, Jake sat in a room full of floating screens, scrolling through hundreds of years of battle reports. Amy sat beside him, translating the alien writing into English. The more Jake read, the more excited he became. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a map showing swarm attack patterns. "They are not random. See how they always hit systems with binary stars first? And they never touch gas giants, they go straight for the rocky planets." Amy studied the map. "You are right, I never noticed that before." "And look at the timing," Jake continued, pulling up another screen. "The attacks always happen during certain seasons on each planet. They are following some kind of schedule." A guard captain named Torax leaned over their shoulders. "What does it matter when they attack? Dead is dead." Jake turned to look at the alien. "Captain, do you have children?" "I have 3 spawn, yes." "And do you feed them at the same time every day?" "Of course. Regular feeding prevents illness and promotes growth." Jake smiled. "Exactly. The swarm is not attacking randomly. They are feeding, and they are feeding their young." Amy's face went pale. You think the Void Swarm has children? I think the Void Swarm is children, Jake said. Look at this data about their behavior. They eat everything on a planet, then they split into smaller groups. Classic reproduction pattern. The big ones divide into little ones, just like bacteria. He pulled up more screens, showing the swarm's movement patterns across the galaxy. And see this, after they reproduce, they always head toward the galactic core. There must be something there they need. Amy was typing rapidly on another screen. The galactic core. Jake, that region is mostly empty space now. It used to be full of ancient stars, but they all went dark millions of years ago. What kind of stars? Jake asked. Massive ones. The kind that collapse into black holes when they die. Jake leaned back in his chair, thinking. On his farm, he had learned that when animals acted aggressively, it was usually because they were scared or desperate. Maybe the Void Swarm was not evil. Maybe it was just trying to survive. Amy, what if they are not from this galaxy at all? What if they came here because their own home was destroyed? Before Amy could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Red lights flashed on the walls. Commander Felix's voice echoed from speakers hidden in the ceiling. All personnel to battle stations. The swarm has been detected entering the outer system. Estimated arrival time, 6 hours. Jake stood up quickly. I need to talk to the Emperor, now. They found Vextar in the war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the approaching swarm. The creatures moved through space like a dark cloud, blocking out the light of distant stars. Human, the Emperor said without looking away from the displays. You have had your chance to study our enemy. Do you have a solution, or should I prepare for the end of my empire? Jake walked up to the central display. The swarm was massive, thousands of creatures moving together like a school of fish. But now that he knew what to look for, he could see the pattern. Your Majesty, I need you to do something that is going to sound crazy. Speak. I need you to send a message to Earth. Tell them to send farmers, mechanics, teachers, regular people with practical skills. Not soldiers, the Emperor turned to stare at Jake. You want me to summon more primitives in our darkest hour? Yes, Jake said firmly. Because regular people think differently than warriors. They solve problems instead of fighting them. This is madness, Felix protested. We need weapons, not farmers. Jake ignored him and focused on the Emperor. Your Majesty, your way has not worked for 500 years. Give me one chance to try something different. The Emperor looked at the approaching swarm, then back at Jake. Even if I agreed, there is no time. The champion's call takes hours to locate and transport a single being. Then we use every summoning device you have, Jake said. Amy told me you have backup systems. Use them all. For a moment, the room was silent except for the hum of the computers and the distant sound of alarms. Then Emperor Vexitar nodded slowly. Do it, he commanded. Send the call to Earth. Request volunteers with practical skills. The next few hours were chaos. Jake worked with Amy to prepare a message explaining the situation. They sent it to Earth, through the same device that had brought Jake to the alien world. To their amazement, the response was immediate. Hundreds of humans volunteered to help. The Emperor's technicians worked frantically to modify every available summoning device. Soon, the palace was full of confused but determined humans. Ben Watson, a mechanic from Detroit, appeared carrying a toolbox bigger than himself. Lisa Chen, a kindergarten teacher from California, brought nothing but a first aid kit and a calm smile. Dan Roberts, a firefighter from Texas, still wore his helmet from the call he had been answering. There were farmers, cooks, nurses, electricians, plumbers, and people from dozens of other ordinary jobs. They all had one thing in common. They were used to solving problems with whatever they had on hand. Jake stood before them in the Great Hall, still holding his rusty machete. Folks, I know this is confusing. I know you are scared. But these aliens need our help, and I think we can give it to them. But what exactly are we up against? Asked a woman named Carol Murphy, who ran a diner in Ohio. Something that everyone else thinks is a monster, Jake replied. But I think it might just be a family looking for a new home. He explained his theory. about the Void Swarm, that they were refugees from a dead galaxy, desperately searching for the energy they needed to survive. The assembled humans listened with the kind of attention they usually gave to weather reports or market prices. "So what do we do?" asked Ben Watson. Jake smiled. "We give them what they need without letting them destroy everything else, just like dealing with any other pest problem." Outside the palace windows, the Void Swarm grew larger in the sky. Time was running out. But for the first time since the crisis began, Emperor Vextar felt something he had forgotten. Not hope, exactly, but curiosity. These strange humans with their practical minds and their willingness to see monsters as problems. Maybe they really could find a solution where his greatest generals had failed. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, but it would not be the kind of battle anyone expected. Jake Miller woke up on a metal bed in a small room with no windows. His whole body ached like he had been kicked by his old mule. Stubborn Pete. The walls glowed with the same purple light he had seen in that big room with the angry alien king. A slot opened in the wall and a tray slid through. The food looked like gray soup with chunks of something that might have been meat. It smelled awful, but Jake's stomach was empty. He had learned long ago that you eat what is put in front of you. As he ate, Jake tried to make sense of what had happened. One minute he was cutting brush behind his barn. The next minute he was standing in front of creatures that looked like they came from his worst nightmares. The whole thing felt like a bad dream, but the ache in his bones was real enough. The door opened without warning. 2 tall aliens in black armor walked in. They had 4 arms each and faces like angry lizards. Without saying a word, they grabbed Jake's arms and pulled him out of the room. They walked through long hallways filled with aliens he had never seen before. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had too many eyes or no eyes at all. A few looked almost human, but their skin was blue or green or covered in scales. All of them stopped what they were doing to stare at Jake. He heard them talking in languages that sounded like growling or singing, or the wind through dry leaves. He did not need to understand the words to know they were making fun of him. The hallway ended at a pair of massive doors. They swung open to reveal the biggest room Jake had ever seen. It was round with walls that went up so high he could not see the top. Thousands of aliens sat on benches, watching and waiting. In the center was a pit about the size of a baseball field. The ground was covered in sand that looked dark red. Jake had a sick feeling he knew why. "Behold," a voice boomed from speakers hidden in the walls. "The champion from the primitive world called Earth." The crowd made sounds that might have been laughter or might have been roars of anger. Jake could not tell the difference. A platform lowered from the ceiling. On it stood Emperor Vextar and several other aliens in fancy clothes. The Emperor's 4 eyes stared down at Jake like he was looking at a bug. "Human," the Emperor called out. "You claim to be the strongest warrior on your world. Today you will prove it or die trying." Jake gripped his machete tighter. The blade was still rusty, but it was all he had. "Look, Your Majesty or whatever, I think there has been some kind of mistake. I am just a farmer. I grow corn and fix tractors. I do not fight monsters." "We shall see," the Emperor replied. A gate opened on the far side of the arena. Something dark and fast rushed out of the tunnel beyond. Jake's first thought was that it looked like a giant spider, but spiders did not have teeth like kitchen knives. The creature was as big as his pickup truck and moved like black lightning. The crowd went quiet. Even the Emperor leaned forward in his chair. The thing they called a void stalker circled Jake like a cat playing with a mouse. Its 8 legs moved without making a sound. Saliva dripped from its mouth, sizzling when it hit the sand. Jake had faced wild animals before. Rabid dogs, angry bulls, even a bear that got into his chicken coop one winter. The secret was not to run. Running made you prey. Instead, Jake stood still and watched. The creature was fast, but it moved in a pattern. Circle left, circle right, then charged straight ahead. Just like Stubborn Pete when he was mad about something. The Void Stalker made its move. It launched itself at Jake with a sound like tearing metal. Instead of trying to block or dodge aside, Jake did something that made the crowd gasp. He stepped forward. The creature expected him to run or fight back. It did not expect him to meet its charge head-on. Jake slipped past its snapping jaws and brought his machete down hard where its head met its neck. The rusty blade found the soft spot between its armor plates. Black blood sprayed across the sand. The Void Stalker crashed into the arena wall and did not get up. The crowd sat in shocked silence. Emperor Vextar's 4 eyes were wide with surprise. Impressive, the Emperor said finally. But one lucky strike does not make a champion. Release the Bone Ripper. The second creature was worse than the first. It walked on two legs like a man, but it was 12 feet tall and covered in spikes. Its arms were too long and ended in claws that could cut through steel. Where the Void Stalker had been fast, the Bone Ripper was strong. It did not circle like the first creature. It just walked straight at Jake, confident that nothing could hurt it. Jake studied the way it moved. The thing was top-heavy, like his old tractor when he loaded too much hay on the back. It trusted its size and strength to win every fight. When the Bone Ripper swung its massive claws, Jake was not there anymore. He had rolled between its legs and come up behind it. His machete found the back of its knee, cutting through whatever passed for tendons in its leg. The creature roared and fell backward. Jake rolled away just in time to avoid being crushed. Before the Bone Ripper could get up, Jake's blade found its throat. 2 down. This is impossible, Commander Felix whispered to the Emperor. No warrior has ever killed 2 swarm creatures alone. How is this primitive doing it? The Emperor did not answer. He was watching Jake carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. Release them all, Vexitar commanded. My lord, the arena master protested. If we release all 3 remaining creatures at once, we'll do it. 3 more gates opened. Out came a void screamer that looked like a flying snake. A painbringer that moved like liquid shadow and something that had no name in any language. It was just teeth and hunger given form. The crowd was on its feet now. This was not a test anymore. This was an execution. Jake looked at his rusty machete, then at the 3 nightmares approaching him. For a moment, fear almost won. These things had destroyed armies. What was one farmer with an old blade going to do? Then he remembered something his grandfather had told him long ago. Son, it does not matter how big the problem is. You just take it one piece at a time. Jake smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was not afraid either. The Void Screamer attacked first, diving from above like a hawk after a mouse. Jake waited until the last second, then threw himself sideways. The creature slammed into the sand where he had been standing. Before it could recover, Jake was on its back, his machete working like he was butchering a hog. The screamer thrashed and died. The painbringer tried to wrap around him like a snake, but Jake had wrestled steers bigger than this thing. He grabbed what passed for its head and twisted until something snapped. The last creature, the nameless one, was the worst of all. It had no weak spots that Jake could see. It was just hunger and hate wrapped in nightmare flesh. But Jake had an idea. Instead of fighting it, he ran. Not away from it, but toward the arena wall. The creature followed, roaring with joy at the chase. At the last second, Jake dropped to his knees and slid under the thing's legs. The creature could not stop in time. It hit the wall with a sound like thunder. Stunned, it fell to the sand. Jake's machete found its heart. The arena was silent as death. 5 void swarm creatures lay dead in the sand. 5 creatures that had destroyed planets lay at the feet of a farmer from Nebraska. Emperor Vextar stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried across the entire arena. It seems, he said, that we may have underestimated the humans.